Hello, Mr. Mayor, Council, and tax-paying citizens of Rancho Cucamonga. My name is Allison Kreider, and I am an inactive volunteer at the animal shelter where I have volunteered the past 6.5 years. On January 11th, I received a letter from the shelter thanking me for my services and letting me know I did not meet my volunteer requirements and that I had been moved to inactive status. I was told that if I would like to volunteer in the upcoming year that I could submit an online city volunteer application, a waiver of liability form, attend a volunteer orientation, interview and tour, and complete a live scan after the volunteer meeting. You see, I was moved to inactive status because on November 26th, a memo was sent out that said, at the end of December and going forward, we will be updating the list of active volunteers at the end of each month. Those volunteers that have given less than 5 hours a month for 3 consecutive months will be changed to inactive status. According to their own memo, it said starting in December and going forward, but in December I was a mere 3 minutes shy of my 5 hours. That's right, I said 3 minutes shy, and they sent me a letter. It had not been 3 consecutive months starting in December. They backdated it to October. So I guess I was supposed to go back in time and volunteer more hours in October and November to meet the new requirements that were emailed out at the end of November. The shelter claims to be so busy that they need additional help, an operations manager, 4 full-time animal control officers, and any other additional staff they've requested, but they have time for this and to turn away free help. They want extra staff, but every month they are going to review volunteer hours, determine who didn't work enough, send out letters, handwritten ones at that, and do the whole time-consuming and costly process of hiring a volunteer over again. I don't have a criminal past, so background check and fingerprinting is a waste of resources and city money. If I did manage to make it through their extensive volunteer investigation and then in another 3 months was shy on my time, I would have to do the whole lengthy and costly process over again. Is this how you plan on wasting taxpayer money? Often people come up here and talk about their issues and you direct them to the person who can resolve it. Well, Council, the director is sitting in the audience today, and I think you should have her talk to me about being moved back to active status without costing the shelter and or city time and money by having me go through the whole process again. Will you do that, and will you tell her to change her volunteer policy that is sometimes not always possible for volunteers to meet the requirements of? Stop wasting money on live scans and maybe put that money towards bringing the buses back.
Thank you.
No?
You can talk to her anytime.
Thanks.
Of course you can. Lisa, followed by John Lyon.
Good evening, Ms.
That's not our policy. If I advance our policy for you, I would have to bend the policy for everybody.
What do you have against the volunteers?
I have nothing against volunteers.
Why don't you want me in your shelter walking dogs? I don't bother anyone, I don't talk to anyone, I go in there, I get my dog, I walk it, and I leave.
Allison, we have a policy in place. The 5-hour minimum has always been there.
And
We sent it out as a reminder.
And it says, going forward, I have your memo, it says
At the end of December and going forward.
backdated.
So at the end of December, we reviewed all the files like the memo said. So at this point in time, you can reapply to be an active volunteer, but we're not going to just make you active.
For over 3 minutes.
Yes.
Do you realize how petty that is?
That's what it is.
Here is the volunteer manual from the Rancho Cucamonga Animal Shelter. This one is from June 2009. And you can see under volunteer hours, nowhere does it state that volunteers have to meet a 5-hour minimum monthly requirement. How about for the 2012 manual? Here's the introduction page where the management team greatly appreciates the time you're about to give, although they don't say anything about it only counting if it is more than 5 hours per month. And they state that this manual has been carefully prepared as a reference guide for volunteers, but I guess not carefully enough to include that a 5-hour monthly minimum is required by all volunteers in order to be considered active. In fact, when they're talking about the volunteer hours, they use the exact same description of them that they did in 2009. Again, nowhere does it state that volunteers must meet a 5-hour monthly minimum to remain active. This screenshot from November 2012 shows the next orientation date and the volunteer opportunity, which also does not state a minimum requirement of 5 hours. And in December of 2012, an update and reminder was sent out to all volunteers, and there's yet again zero mention of a 5-hour monthly minimum policy. How about in 2013? Here's a screenshot from the shelter's Becoming a Volunteer page from March 25th, 2013. Date is located in the top right corner. This was 2 days after the shelter held a volunteer orientation. As you can see, there's no mention of a 5-hour monthly minimum. New volunteers who attended this orientation were also not given a new volunteer manual. Here's the dog walking job description from Volgistics, dated July 2013. It also does not state that volunteers have to meet a 5-hour minimum monthly requirement. And here's the description for the cat socializers, also from July 2013, showing no minimum requirement for hours in the shelter. And the same thing for the caretaker job description, no 5-hour monthly minimum stated. Here is the job description for the foster care, which includes no minimum, which the director has stated does not apply to them. But if it always applied to the volunteers that are volunteering in the actual center, why is it never included in those job descriptions? What about in August 2013, when the shelter updated the How to Become a Volunteer page? Once again, there's nothing stated regarding the 5-hour minimum. And here is another screenshot from September 2013, with no minimum stated. And yet again in October 2013, you can see no 5-hour minimum is required per month. In November 2013, the volunteer program was closed and no longer showed the minimum requirements needed for volunteers. And it remained this way until January of 2014, when all of a sudden it now states under the Becoming a Volunteer page that volunteers must serve a minimum of 5 hours per month.
We have a policy in place. The 5-hour minimum has always been there.
The Animal Shelter Director explains in the definition of the active volunteer memo that by dropping these volunteers that cannot meet the minimum requirement, resources and training opportunities for new volunteers are opened up, allowing a greater number of volunteers to join our team. This has got to be one of the most illogical statements ever made. How does it make any sense to drop a 6-year volunteer veteran who doesn't need additional training and is currently even fostering a dog who was actually pulled from the Rancho shelter, and make her reapply to become a volunteer and go through training classes all over again? Miss Kreider was at the shelter twice in December of 2013, and just a mere 3 minutes shy, as you can see. An easy oversight unless you have a stopwatch running the second you clock in at the shelter. So why move her to inactive, even though she was physically at the shelter walking dogs? So she has to reapply again, and they can deny her, which is clearly stated in part of the volunteer frequently asked questions section. But why would they want to deny her, you say? Well, could be because the shelter already fired her husband, Jesse Kreider, in 2013, who had been an employee at the shelter in good standing for over 6 years. That was until he sided with 4 other volunteers who were fired in November of 2012 for speaking out against conditions of the animal shelter. And also because she is part of that group who have spoken out at nearly every city council meeting in 2013 regarding the state of the shelter, including the 60% decline in dog walkers at the shelter that year.